Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. Today you join me in the 2024 Hyundai Bayon, a small crossover car similarly sized to something like a Volkswagen T-Cross, a Skoda Kamiq and a Ford Puma. I'm here today to find out if it stacks up against those rivals. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about drivetrain and trim options. It's very simple when choosing one of these because there's 3 trim options and only 1 engine option. There's no mild or full hybrid, unfortunately, like some rivals. It's just a standard 3-cylinder 1-litre turbo with 100 horsepower. It's quite a peppy and thrummy little engine. Although it's quite slow to rev, it does feel really nippy and I've been impressed with its performance overall. Hyundai claim around 51 mpg combined. I've been getting more like 45. You can either have a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual clutch auto. In terms of trims, they're actually pretty generous as standard, and thankfully there's no real options to be had at all. What I really love about Hyundai Kia stuff is they include all of the stuff in the trim, so you don't have to go faffing about. It makes it really easy to buy these used because you know exactly what you're getting. Your base trim is pretty generous as standard. It's called the Advance and starts from around £22,500, and that one gets you ambient lighting, which is multicoloured as standard, which is pretty good in a car of this class. Dual 10.25-inch displays, so no analog dials anywhere in the range, LED lights, 16-inch alloy wheels, reversing camera and sensors, cruise control which includes your lane keep and follow and your automatic one-touch steering on the highway. Step it up to the premium at 24 grand and you get some additional things like heated seats, heated steering wheel, front parking sensors, climate controls and 17-inch alloy wheels. The ultimate trim at £25,000 has things like your smart keyless entry with button start, Bose audio system, a sunroof which is nice to be included in the specification, blind spot monitoring and also a wireless charging pad for your phone. So a top spec one of these will run you about the same money as a bottom spec Puma. So it shows that Hyundai are keeping the price of this down. The styling's been changed for this model year and it looks more like the Hyundai Kona, which I think is quite good. It brings some consistency across the lineup. I don't think it's the most handsome car in its class. I think probably that award would go to the Renault Clio currently, but the engine in this is better than the standard Clio engines. It's just a shame that you don't get any options for hybrids or mild hybrids. The paint on this one is Mangrove Green Pearl and it's the only free and standard paint option. There are some optional metallics and flat paints as well. Overall, I think it's got quite a purposeful look to it. I'm not a massive fan of the styling overall, but I think it's not very offensive and I like the fact that there's a nice light bar. It does look quite modern, especially in this paintwork. Alloy wheels standard across the range is good and I don't think it looks quite as pleasant as something like a Puma, and like I said, I think personally my favourite of the small cars at the moment is probably the new Clio, so that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I think from a sort of a technology standpoint and a warranty standpoint, this is probably the one that you'd be considering. Step inside and it's kind of a similar affair really. Whilst it does look modern enough with the 2 displays in here that's standard across the range, you can tell there's some decent kit in here, but it does look like a kind of dated design at this point, and I don't think it's helped by the spec on this one. It has this kind of grey dashboard which has these grey plastics, and I think it makes it look a little bit old-fashioned, to be honest. You can get all black though, and it's a no-cost option. The ambient lighting does definitely lift the cabin, and it's nice that that's included from the base level as well. And although things are angled towards me, so it's quite an ergonomic layout, I just don't think it looks the most stylish. Some of the materials are quite disappointing as well. You've got some really nasty plastics down the bottom, and even up the top, it's just not the best. Even the touch points and the buttons do feel a little bit mushy in comparison to something like a Ford Puma. But again, this does come in at a slightly lower price point, so it's one of those trade-offs that you've got to think about. These seats aren't infinitely adjustable, but they're quite comfortable. They're kind of firm, but they have support in the right places that I need it. In terms of driving position, my legs are a little bit too long for this car, to be honest. There is tilt and telescopic as standard across the range for wheel adjustment, which is good, and it means that it is easier to reach for me. And I can get on my elbows in kind of a decent position, but I do feel like, especially in this manual, I can't quite get my legs right. I do have specifically long legs, but I just, you know, it's just one of those things really. I'd probably have to get the seat really low to enjoy the driving position quite so much, and then I wouldn't get so much of a view out of this kind of narrow windscreen. Visibility though is pretty decent. Although there's quite a large C-pillar, I've got a reverse cam on here, which isn't the best, but it gets the job done. And I like the mirrors. The mirrors are a nice size, and they've got this kind of like lip design to the top of them. I think they look pretty cool from sitting here. Overall, I've sat in far worse cars of this size. It's just that this feels a little bit lower slung than some of the other little crossovers. Looking around, it's functional, but it's just a little bit bland. I also keep thinking about the MG3 and the MG ZS, because those come in cheaper than this car, and the ZS is a much larger car. You know, they start from around 22, I think, to about 22,500, and the MG3 starts from just over 18,000. So, you know, it's a bit of a tricky one, because although you get the 5-year unlimited mileage warranty on the Hyundai, and it's kind of a more reputable name in terms of reliability, MG still has a bit of a question mark above its head in terms of reliability and after sales. Sitting in those cars with the full hybrid, The full hybrid in those gets around 10 mpg more than this and has double the power, feels much faster off the line, and the interior quality in terms of the buttons and the design feels more modern and more premium. So I'm finding it a little bit hard to sit in here and justify the nearly 25 grand price tag of this one I'm in today. On to some positives though, however. Of course, being Hyundai, the infotainment is really slick, really responsive and works flawlessly. I've never had any issues with it, and I love the fact that you've got drive profiles on there for when you're got multiple users of the car. I love the fact that you've got things like quiet mode, which puts the sound only through the front speakers, so that if you've got kids in the back sleeping, you're all good. Voice memos for if you just want to jot something down on the move. And also just things like it will close the climate vents when you go through a tunnel. It's just a nice thing. You've got Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, of course, and that integrates using USB-C. You've got 180 watt 12 volt outlets as well, and in this one a wireless charging pad, which is slightly inconveniently placed, but it gets the job done. It's not the most recent version of their infotainment, but it's still perfectly sufficient for modern use. And using Apple CarPlay, it's nice and crisp. The screen is a nice high quality and it's slightly angled towards me. I think it's a really good setup. This one in front of me doesn't display an awful lot of information. It displays your basic trip information, information about the car and traffic sign recognition and so on. But there's no kind of integration of maps like on their higher end cars and in stuff like, you know, Volkswagen Audi Group stuff like the T-Cross, for example. You do, however, get some nice dials that are impacted by the drive mode that you put it in, and it shows you basic information about your range. Best in class, no, but it looks modern and works great. There are some capacitive touch buttons below the infotainment screen, one of which being a star shortcut button, which you've also got on the steering wheel. You can program that to your choosing, which I've always liked. But the capacitive buttons are a bit fiddly to use. I wouldn't worry too much though, because you've got a physical volume dial and you don't need to use them that much anyway. And thankfully in this model you have a load of physical climate controls, which look the part. They do everything you'd intend them to do. You know, you've got buttons down there for all of your ventilation, your auto climate and stuff like that. And you've also got just a toggle for your temperature on this side and then fan speed on the other side. So it's really simple, it works effectively, and that's in every model apart from the base. Your heated seat controls are down by the gear lever, which is a little bit annoying. They're kind of behind the gear selector alongside your parking sensor buttons, parking camera button and your button for your drive mode. So that there is a little bit of an oversight. Also, for some reason on this one, they've decided to put the heated steering wheel button down by your knee, which is a really annoying place for it. In a lot of their other cars, they have it on the steering wheel, and I think that's a much better place for it. But again, overall, not too many complaints in terms of the functionality. It's kind of basic, but it works and does the trick, and things are where you expect them to be. In terms of the steering wheel, like I said, I'm not a fan of the design, but you've got plenty of decent control on there for your media, your cruise control, and what I always love about Hyundais and Kias, a one-touch driving assist feature that does lane keep and also your highway driving. So when you press it once, the car will start steering itself on the motorway, and it just works really well. It's nice and easy to use. The only thing to bear in mind though is that whilst this has all of those safety features built in, I have found on this car the lane keep to be particularly invasive. It gives you that warning that you just heard there when you stray a lane, but also haptic feedback through the wheel, but it will also try and tug you back into lane. And I found that sometimes if I'm going through a town and I stray the white lines because of parked cars, it will try and steer me into the parked cars a little bit. And their more advanced systems on their more expensive cars aren't like that. And the sort of assistance features in the Fords and the MGs and other rivals like that just seem a little bit less invasive. Shut up. There are some cup holders down here by the manual handbrake, but they're really annoyingly placed and they interfere with the operation of the handbrake, which is a bit of a silly design in my opinion. But you do have some storage in here in the center armrest and a decent sized glove box as well, which is soft close. The Bose audio is also pretty good in here. It's definitely not the best, but of course it's a small system and you've got plenty of punch in the bass and you've got lots of EQ settings to tweak to your liking as well. You also get nice clear readouts of everything you do, so if you turn lights on and things like that, it comes up on the screen. I think that's always a nice touch. You've also got a sunshade in here, which does make a difference, and a little sunroof. The only material that I think is really bad is this horrible nasty plastic on that mirror there, but it can be forgiven. Overall though, the tech and the way everything is laid out, I'm perfectly happy with. I think you would be too if you was a long-term owner. In terms of practicality, it's also kind of middle of the road really. You've got a decent amount of space behind me and I would comfortably sit behind myself. It's not the biggest car in its class for sure though, so in terms of the kind of boot space and practicality, something like a Skoda Kamiq or a Ford Puma will be better and more versatile, but you do have an adjustable boot floor in this car as standard and a 60-40 split, which is good. I definitely wouldn't want to have 3 adult passengers back there for any length of time because the car is too narrow for that, and you've got a bit of a transmission hump as well, but overall it's not a bad space. There's no armrest or cup holders back there, but you do get the zips to cover the ISOFIX points, which mean they're nice and neat and tidy, and no covers to lose. I do like that the adjustable boot floor is a standard thing as well and not an optional extra. The ride is quite smooth. I think the Skoda Kamiq and the T-Cross are a little bit better, but I think overall this one is quite a comfortable car, especially for sort of a long journey cruise. And the handling isn't too bad either. It's just there's a lot of vagueness in the steering and the electrical assistance tries to take over quite a bit. But overall, it handles okay. It's just not, it doesn't give you the same level of kind of texture and feedback as a Ford Puma would. That's definitely a much better handling car overall. So in terms of how it actually drives then, well, as I say, you do get a bit of interference from the kind of driver assistance stuff, but overall it is relatively fun and engaging due to this nice peppy little engine. I've got the 6-speed manual here, and the only thing with it is that it is a little bit high, the clutch. I don't really like the clutch that much. The gear change itself is quite notchy and nice, but I kind of lack the engagement a little bit because you have to rev the engine out a little bit to get the most out of it. And then when you do that, it's quite slow to drop the revs. So if I sort of give it some beans, you do really feel that turbo kick in, and it is peppy. You get a nice thrum from it. It feels quite good in operation. It's just that I prefer the 7-speed dual clutch myself, but if you're looking for a manual, you wouldn't be disappointed with the kind of the feel of this. It's just that personally for me, I don't find the clutch that nice to use. But it definitely does pair nicely though with this little 3-cylinder engine. The thing is, now we're in a world of hybrids and electric cars and stuff like that, so it is nice that these nice little kind of thrummy 3-cylinder cars do exist. But I do just think they've missed the trick, eliminating the mild hybrid options. It's not too bad though. If I switch down into fourth at 50 mile an hour, to engage the gear, I can feel the turbo kick in, and we're very quickly up to speed. It's definitely a car with this manual gearbox that's more engaging and fun to drive at speed on a country road than it is to crawl around in town. I think that's where things like the MG3 really excel, because off the line that uses mostly electric and you can still fill it up like a normal car with petrol. So those hybrid options are really versatile for those city situations. It's so smooth around town and there's no kind of jerking around, there's no turbo lag. So I find that a bit of an easier thing to live with day to day. The blind spot monitoring features are nice though, and also with the reverse cam, it also gives you a warning if someone's about to drive past and sort of pull into you as you're pulling out of a space, which is quite advanced. I love the 3-cylinder engine note as well. It's nice and fun. It does feel quite good to just toss it around. I don't have major complaints about the handling besides the vagueness of the steering, but this isn't designed to be a sporty car. When you put it from drive mode into the sport drive mode, it definitely sharpens that throttle response a little bit and things like that, but nothing kind of crazy really. But it's a little commuter car designed to be practical, and I think overall practicality is pretty decent. I just don't think it's class leading. So between that and the fact that it's priced higher than some of the better hybrid rivals, I do find it a little bit hard to recommend. Overall, it's a nice combination of modern tech and old school controls, and I think some people who are coming from an older car will be happy with it. But I just don't think it represents the best value for money in this segment, and I'd find it a hard recommendation, to be honest with you. Personally, I much preferred daily driving an MG3, which is a cheaper car, because it's got double the power of this, it's much smoother around town, and the interior was more modern for me. And a Ford Puma, whilst more expensive, is just going to be a much nicer car to drive. And then you've got the Volkswagen Audi Group alternatives. And the Renault Clio looks a lot better. I don't know, I just feel like there's so much competition that it's kind of hard for this one to stand out as something that I would recommend. But that's not to say that it's a bad car. I still think you'd be perfectly happy with it. I just don't think it's the one. That being said though, Hyundai and Kia are coming out with some truly great stuff at the moment, so it's hard not to really recommend them, especially when their after-sale service is supposed to be so good. I'd put my money elsewhere, but that's not to say that I don't think you should even look into one of these, because overall, it is a decent all-rounder. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks to Hyundai for sending me out the car, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.